and welcome to Boostring, bringing Willamette to you. Today's conversation features Sue Corner, Director of Recruitment for the College of Arts and Sciences here at Willamette University, an alumna herself. She graduated in 1990 with a major in English and double minors in religious studies and psychology. Sue has spent 3 decades helping generations of students find their way to Willamette, and we're excited to talk through some of the options students have when it comes to submitting applications, preparing for and taking tests, and other relevant, if sometimes confusing, aspects of the process. She will also share the most common pitfalls applicants fall into and offer advice about maximizing the application to present yourself in the most effective and authentic way possible. Sue, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Tiffany. It's great to be a part of this series, and I appreciate that you've made this time available. And I really appreciate that there are people here to hear the information. I love it, that it might be helpful to folks, and I look forward to talking about this topic. I'm going to share my screen. As Tiffany mentioned, we're talking about pitfalls and opportunities in the college application process tonight. And for those who have not been a part of this series in the past, just so you know that my background is relevant, I hope, to what we're talking about. I've been in higher ed for about 30 years, and 20 of those have been in the admission realm specifically. So my annual work involves reading lots and lots of applications, and over the years there have certainly been thousands of them, and I've worked very closely with a lot of families. That's the way the process works at a place like Willamette, and so it's been really fun for me to get to work one-on-one with people in this process, and all of that, I think, is what feeds my interest and I hope sort of expertise in being able to talk about some of these things. I also happen to have some personal experience on the parent side of this process, not just the professional side. I have a son who's just finished his undergraduate time, and a daughter who is starting her first year at Willamette this year. So I've navigated some of these pitfalls and processes as a parent also. So tonight we're going to cover, as Tiffany kind of already went over this, but points of confusion. I think there are some language, there are some concepts in this process that are just kind of big basic pieces of college application that can be confusing to people. So we'll try to clear some of those up. And then we'll talk about what I see as the top 5 mistakes or pitfalls that people make specifically in the application, not in the search process per se, but the application itself. There are so many opportunities in that document that you prepare, and it's so easy to not let those be pitfalls. So we'll talk about some of those, and then I'll just do a moment at the very end about what some of this means in a virtual world, because I know some of these parts of this process are different because of what we're experiencing. So we'll talk about that just a little bit too. So points of confusion and some of the concepts that trip us up. The first thing that comes to mind for me about this is the idea of application rounds and the process by which people are applying, whether it's early action, early decision, regular decision, restrictive early action. There are all these terms. And they basically mean the same thing across the board. So from college to college, these terms are consistent, but I think often students don't know really what they mean, and they don't know why they would make a choice for one round versus another. So I want to quickly go through these to alleviate that confusion and make sure people really understand. It's fairly important that you apply under the round that really makes most sense for you. So early action is a deadline by which you can apply, just like it sounds, early to a school or a variety of schools. So usually under early action, you would complete your application by mid-November. Sometimes it's November 1st. So fairly early in the senior year, you're completing that application. And by completing early, it means you're just simply going to get your decision back earlier, most often by the end of December or very early January. So early action is not a binding route to admission, meaning by applying through an early action round, you are not making any commitment to a college that if admitted, you will come, or you're not signing any sort of contract. You're simply applying early so that you can hear back early. You still have until what is generally the national candidate reply date, which is May 1. You still have until that time to make your decision about where you want to go. The advantages of applying early action are that you get started on and complete the application process in a busy senior year that I observe only seems to get busier as time goes on. So being proactive about getting this done soon in the senior year, I think is very advantageous for students. It allows you to be first in line to ask for recommendations from teachers and counselors. I think that's a real advantage. I do think those students who apply early action tend to demonstrate to us as the admission committee that they're organized, that they have enthusiasm, that they're excited about college. Just by being early in the process, that does seem to come through. So I think that's an advantage. And then I think there is a great advantage in getting that decision back early and knowing exactly where you stand with colleges by the end of December. It means you head into spring of your senior year with the ball in your court. You know what your admission decision is, you know what your aid looks like, and you really then get to spend those final months of your senior year deciding what works for you, rather than sort of nervously waiting to hear back from colleges. And I think that can feel pretty good. I think that can alleviate some of that senior year anxiety. Disadvantages of early action, I will just be really transparent that I am a huge early action fan, and I don't see disadvantages. I think it is a really, really preferred timeline for the vast majority of students. Now, early decision sometimes gets confused with early action simply because they both have that term early, and often it is the same deadline schedule for many colleges. If they have both early action and early decision options, they will often be the same dates. That's the case for Willamette. We offer both, and November 15th is our deadline for both early action and early decision. So that's a pretty common model. In contrast to early action, if you apply somewhere early decision, you are very clearly telling that institution that they are your top choice. And if you are admitted, you will come. It is a binding application. You sign a contract that is part of the application that says, I am making this commitment right now at the point of application that if you offer me admission, I will sign on the dotted line, I will submit my deposit, I will withdraw my other applications from every other school, and I will come. So it's a really big commitment, very different from early action. And obviously, because you are telling that school that they are your clear number one choice, you may only apply to one school early decision. You're only allowed to have one favorite, one top choice. So it's considered highly unethical to apply early decision to more than one institution. So the advantages of early decision are just like early action. You finish the process earlier in the senior year, which I do think can be a very good thing for a lot of students. It's a route to application that allows you to demonstrate your enthusiasm for a school clearly by getting students to apply who are telling us, wow, you're my favorite choice. I'm so enthusiastic about you that I'm applying early decision. That can both feel really good to the application reader, to the admission committee. It also can be used as a way to compensate for some deficits in your application. So across the board, not just at Willamette, but at lots of places, admission committees will sometimes dip a little bit in their profile or be a little bit more generous in their offers of admission for students who apply early decision, because the idea of that enthusiasm and that willingness to make a commitment early on will some sort of compensate for some of those other deficits. So that's a definite advantage if a student has a real keen top interest. And then I think some would consider an advantage that your search is completely done then by January. If you apply early decision and you are admitted to your early decision school, your search is done. You don't have anything more to think about because you've made that commitment. So it means the spring of your senior year is really stress-free when it comes to college choice. The disadvantages of early decision, and I think they're pretty significant. Making a binding commitment to a college choice this early in the process is a pretty big deal. It's very common for me to see students' ideas about where they think they want to be evolve pretty dramatically over the course of their senior year. They may start out thinking that they really want to go to one place, and by the time they've really interacted with different schools and navigated all of the components of application, they've come to a very different decision by the time they get to spring of their senior year. So if you've made that decision really early on, you have to be absolutely certain that that top choice really is where you want to go, because that commitment is firm. I also think that piece about, using early decision as a way to try to get into a school that's a little bit of a reach for you, that can certainly work and make sense for some students, but I also think it can be a disadvantage in that it can allow students sometimes to mismatch themselves to an institution. If you're really having to use that tool to gain access to a reach school, is it going to ultimately be the right academic fit for you? I think that can be a disadvantage in the outcome of early decision. Regular decision is simply the kind of main or regular application deadline. It's later than those early deadlines. Usually it's sometime in mid-January to mid-February. Willamette's regular decision deadline is January 15th. With regular decision, you generally receive your admission decision sometime in early March to early April. So as opposed to the late December announcement of admission decisions that comes with the early deadlines, you receive the admission decision with regular decision quite a bit later. So the advantages of regular decision are that you just have a little bit more time in the fall to intentionally build the list of places that you want to apply to. I think even though senior year gets busy, you do have more time just in terms of calendar time to complete your application. And particularly, I think some students really feel who choose to apply regular decision, they feel like they want that winter break time to be able to really dust up and, make sure that application looks perfect. And that concentrated time, break time, can be really good for that. Another advantage is that there is no limit to the number of schools that you can apply to regular decision. That mostly is true with early action as well, although it's not at all with early decision. And then with regular decision, obviously, there's no binding commitment early in the process like there is with early decision. The disadvantages with regular decision are that, in some cases, depending on the institution, you could feel like you're being grouped with a slightly less motivated group. I would say that at Willamette, we receive half of our applications come in early action or early decision. Half of them come in regular decision. And I would say there tends to be a slightly higher profile among the early applicants. So it comes across and feels like a slightly more motivated group. So if you want to position yourself in being a part of that group, it puts you at a slight disadvantage if you're in the regular decision group. At some places, I think there can be a concern that, is the class going to fill before I apply if I'm waiting till regular decision? Places do this very differently, but some will admit a large portion of their class in the early rounds, and so it might limit those spaces a little bit for you. I don't think that's a consistent thing at lots of places, but it can be for some. And then I think the biggest disadvantage potentially of regular decision is that there's just not a lot of time once you find out if you're admitted, if that's May 1 or March 1 or April 1, you only have until May 1 to then decide where you're going to attend. So it really limits the amount of time for the ball to be in your court and for you to really make that big, important decision. Rolling admission is where just admission decisions are made throughout the entire cycle. There sometimes isn't a deadline at all. Sometimes there's a preferred deadline that's communicated, and it's often pretty late in the spring. Admissions decisions are just made and released consistently. This is a route to admission that's usually used by schools that are less selective. It's certainly the case for community colleges. And there's a lot less pressure, I would say, when applying to a school that has rolling admission because there just aren't those worrisome deadlines. Those are the main four, but I want to throw in this selective early action application round as well, because this is confusing. This is really confusing to a lot of people, but it's important to know about if you are a person or a parent of a person who is looking at applying to some of the most hyper-selective colleges in the country. Selective early action is not used by very many places. The schools listed here and a handful of others use selective early action. And what it is it's an early action plan. So it isn't binding like early decision is. It isn't something where you're locking into a commitment or you have to pay your deposit early and withdraw other applications if you're admitted. You have until May 1 to make your decision still. But under selective early action, you are not allowed to apply to any other school under any other early type of application process. So if you're applying to a selective early action school, you can't apply early action anywhere else, or certainly early decision. You can apply to other schools in their regular decision round, but not early. So again, this isn't something that you run across in a lot of institutions, but there are enough important institutions, certainly where we see overlap at Willamette, that sometimes we will understand that a student who otherwise would seem like they would probably be an early action candidate for us puts themselves in the regular decision round because they're also applying to Stanford under their selective early action, and they're simply not allowed to use our early action round. I'm not going to go into great detail about my opinions about selective early action, except that I will say that I don't think this serves students very well. I think this is a tactic that serves these institutions very well. I don't think it's very good for students. That's all I'll say about that. So those are application rounds. Another point of confusion that I think is really common in this process is just the idea of test optional admission. This is a topic that certainly gets lots of attention these days. Test optional just simply means that no SAT or ACT or other standardized tests are required for admission. And often, but not always, it means no standardized test scores are required for merit aid consideration. At most institutions that are test optional, it means that even if the score is reported, like if it happens to be printed on the student's transcript that comes from their high school, or it accidentally gets sent from the College Board to an institution, if it's lumped in with a group of reported scores that we're receiving, it still is not used in the admission decision, even if it's received. So going test optional, this has become a very popular movement in the last several years, I would say, because there's become this increasing understanding of the fact that there's quite a bit of inequity in the standardized test process, and it doesn't necessarily tell us a lot about a student's actual ability to do the work. I would say that the movement toward test optional has ramped up incredibly during COVID-19, simply because the testing agencies like the ACT and the College Board have not been able to administer their tests. So colleges, in response, those who have not formally been test optional, many of them have chosen to go test optional permanently, or many have chosen to join the test optional movement, at least until COVID-19 moves along. So if you're curious about schools that are test optional, fairtest.org, which is listed here, is the most current and accurate list of schools that feature a test optional policy. It is really important to test or to check the policies of individual colleges that you're applying to. They may list themselves as test optional, but there may be some subtle differences for what that means from school to school. So it's important to check that independently for each place. And then I'll just throw in here, since we're talking about tests, that for those who are able to access the tests this fall, who are planning to take the SAT or the ACT, if you're looking for test preparation, I'm a huge fan of Khan Academy. They do an incredible job of helping students prepare for these tests, and it's free and available to everyone. It's online, so there isn't that inequitable need to invest a bunch of money in test preparation. So I love Khan Academy. Another point of confusion is this idea of rigor. You know, we talk all the time, college admission officers talk all the time about rigorous preparation, and I think sometimes that term is just misunderstood by folks. So I would say to demonstrate the ability to handle a rigorous course load means to show primarily through your transcript that you've actively taken advantage of the challenging courses available to you in your high school setting. So I think sometimes when we say we expect to see rigorous preparation, sometimes students or families will get worried about that because maybe they don't go to a school that has an AP program or an IB program, and they worry that their preparation is being compared to students who have those particular rigorous options available to them. And I think it's fair to say, certainly at Willamette and at the vast majority of institutions where I have colleagues, that everyone understands there is context to the student's preparation. And when we assess rigor, when looking at a transcript, we understand that we can't hold students accountable for a level of rigor that isn't available to them. So we can't expect them to take classes that aren't a part of their what's available to them. So you know, if a student is at a school that has an AP program, then it would be a part of what we're looking for in the transcript. Doesn't mean they have to take every AP class offered, but because that is what represents rigor at their school, we would be looking for some of that. If honors courses are the top rigorous choice at a given high school, then we would be looking to see that some of those courses are showing up on the transcript. For some high schools, dual credit opportunities are the rigorous choice, where they're taking classes in the high school that are also available for community college credit or four-year college credit, or they're taking some classes at the local community college as part of their high school experience and gaining that dual credit. So whatever the overall rigor is at your school, whatever is the most rigorous choice, that's what rigor means for you. And there isn't an expectation that you're going beyond that. I will clarify that for many, I would say, for many schools, there is an opportunity to have both, say, an AP program and dual credit options. A lot of schools offer both of those things. And we often get questions about, well, which should I do? Which conveys rigor more adequately for me from my school? Should I take the AP class or should I take the dual credit class at the community college? And I would say at Willamette, we certainly would advise that the AP class better exemplifies rigor to us, or an IB program if that's offered at a school that also offers dual credit. those would better speak to a student really seeking out the most rigorous opportunity for them. That's not to say that dual credit courses aren't rigorous also, but they're less consistently rigorous than the AP or IB curriculum. Those curriculum choices are so well understood and so consistent across the country that we see those as speaking to rigor in a very strong way. So if you're toying with the idea of one over the other, I would say that AP or IB speaks to rigor in the way you probably are most looking for. One other point of confusion is, what are extracurriculars? Now, this seems like a silly question, potentially, but this has changed over the years. And I think often we see in applications that students are misunderstanding what it truly means to list their activities or their extracurricular pursuits. The meaningful ways you spend your time outside of class are your extracurricular activities. So this doesn't mean it has to be a school-related activity. And I think sometimes that's where students get hung up. When we're looking at extracurricular activities, or just what is the activities section on the common application, as admission committee members, we're looking to answer questions like those listed here. We're looking to see, what are your passions? What are the things that really make you unique? What kinds of demands have been placed on you with your time outside of high school? And how do you demonstrate commitment? Are you curious about lots of different things? Are you brave to try new things? Are you highly engaged in activities? Have you persevered through some interesting commitments? These are the kinds of things that we're looking for. It's all about context and understanding who you are and where you're coming from. And so these are sort of what we're trying to gauge when we look at that activity section. So for many, there are obviously those rather traditional extracurricular involvements that we have seen for years and years. Things like involvement in the arts or academic clubs, certain kinds of special interest clubs that happen at school, or athletics. These are the kind of most traditional categories that we often see some involvement from students. And the hard thing is that some students will stop there and they forget about the idea that service, and not just traditional community service that happens through school, but service through your church or service to your family. This is one that often gets left off of applications, and yet is a really important part of time that many students spend outside of class. They are looking after younger siblings. They are helping with an elderly family member, several times a week. They're really important family service components that are very, very legitimate parts of that extracurricular activity list that shouldn't be forgotten. Work or internships should absolutely be included in activities, paid or unpaid, whether it's during the summer or during the school year. Any kind of part-time work opportunity tells us a lot about who you are and what you are able to be committed to. So students often forget to list that, and we really want to know about that. Travel sometimes can be really important to list and yet gets overlooked. It doesn't mean that you should put every family vacation you've taken on your application. I don't know that that tells us a lot about you, but travel that you've done, maybe through a school trip, something potentially with your family, or some kind of exchange program, particularly if there's an academic or learning component that comes as part of that travel. I think that's really great to know about you and helps us understand some of what you've learned and what you're curious about and what you know. So travel can be worth listing also. And then any significant hobby. I put some of the ones that I've seen over the years that I have just loved, as a falconer. How often do you see that on an application? And it's so interesting and it's so fun to know. Helps us really see what's unique about these students. Somebody who's taken the time to earn their pilot's license, that tells me a lot about their bravery and courage and interests. We had a student who was a semi-professional rock climber a couple of years ago. These kinds of things are important to list as well, even if they don't have a connection to school or something that, feels like it's a traditional extracurricular activity. These really help give us that context that we're looking for. So I always encourage people to expand that idea of what they might think of in terms of what extracurricular activities mean. So now that we've talked about some of those confusing terms, I want to talk really specifically about the things that I see as the top mistakes or pitfalls that people often make and how we turn those into opportunities. I think some of these initially are going to seem really, really obvious, and yet you'd be amazed at how often we see people fall into these pitfalls, and there is no need to. So the number one pitfall is grammatical or punctuation errors on the application. And again, it feels like I shouldn't even have to say that. It seems so obvious that, of course, you just want to spell things correctly. And yet it happens all the time that students will just not get this right. And I think some of it comes from we text all the time these days, and students are so tech savvy. They do so much on their phones. And there's ways that we do things on our phones that don't include punctuation. They don't include capitalization. And so I think that just will translate to the application, and students will think, well, it doesn't matter if I'm not capitalizing, English when I'm listing that course. You're not doing something that's a casual communication. This is a formal, important document. And so taking time to clean those kinds of things up is really, really important. If there are grammatical errors, if there are punctuation errors, especially if they're really glaring, they can send all kinds of messages that you don't want sent through your application. It can make me think, this applicant just isn't organized. They're clearly not organized, or they don't have their time management skills pulled together because they clearly didn't give themselves time to proofread their application. Or if there are lots of errors, especially within the essay part of the application, it can really cast doubt on the student's actual writing ability. Are they just not prepared to be the writer that we need them to be at the college level? That may not be the case at all. And yet we can't tell that if they haven't taken the time to proofread and clean up their writing. It can also send a message that they just don't really care about this particular application. So maybe they're not that interested in Willamette if they've not taken the time to do a thorough job on their application. That hurts our feelings a little bit, but can also, lean us toward a waitlist or a deny if the student isn't a good fit in other ways. It can cause us to think, this may be too much of a risk to offer admission to the student if they've not truly prepared an application that is error-free. So I feel like these things are so easily fixed by having someone proofread, by giving yourself time to make sure you've gone through the application several times. This is just kind of an easy, low-hanging fruit kind of opportunity to do a good job. And you have to think about the fact that when we're reading applications, we are often doing many of them in a row, back to back to back, for days on end. We read and read and read all winter long. And so if you think about comparing in your mind an application that is that has a lot of punctuation errors or grammatical errors, and then the very next one that we read is perfectly proofread and everything is beautifully done, that contrast can be glaring. Not that we're comparing one applicant to another necessarily, but in days filled with reading application, you don't want to be that student who sends these messages of lack of preparation just because you failed to proofread. Pitfall number 2 is what I would call submitting an incomplete application. And this doesn't mean that you're not submitting parts of the credentials that we're asking for. You have to tick all of those boxes before we will read an application. But I see an incomplete application as one where a student has just done the minimal parts that they have to do on the application itself, meaning questions to certain answers to certain questions are just answered in a couple of words rather than a full sentence. Or certain parts that maybe aren't absolutely required are just left blank. This to me feels incomplete. I think you should enter into the process of completing an application, whether it's the Common App or an institutional specific application. You should enter into that with an idea of not leaving any section blank whatsoever, of using every single opportunity within that form to tell us a little bit more about yourself. If you just remember that every question and the whole application process is about us understanding who you are and the context from which you're coming, that's what we're looking for. And so you should see everything as an opportunity to help us understand you better. You want to take time to describe your activities thoroughly and deeply, not just list, a one-word answer. If there's the essay portion or a short answer portion where a word count is suggested, you want to work reasonably up to that word count number. It doesn't mean you have to, add in unimportant parts to the essay just to get it to be a certain length, but you don't want to be the person who writes 100 words when everyone else is writing 500. That looks glaringly like you didn't care, or you're just not that interested. An important tip, and I think I've mentioned this before in this series, but for those who haven't heard the other components, there's an additional information section on the Common application. It comes right after the essay question, and a lot of students just kind of gloss over the additional information piece. It's simply a text box. If you click on additional information, it just opens up another box where you can write anything you want. You can tell us anything additional that you feel is important for us to know about you. So this is an amazing opportunity, and I love it when a student takes the time to click into that additional information section and say things like, I just wanted it to be clear to the admission committee that I stopped taking math after my junior year in high school because I had taken the highest level that was available to me. And so I used the time in my senior year to take an additional science class instead. Or I just want it to be clear that there's a dip in my transcript in my sophomore year because my grandmother got sick and our family really had to do some extra work to take care of her, and I was a part of that. So my grades suffered a little bit. Or I didn't have time to list this on my activities section, but I wanted to really clarify how important the opportunity was for me to get to go on this exchange program with my school in the summer of my junior year. It really was life-changing for me, and this is why. Any of these sorts of things that just add nuance and distinction to who you are, or explain certain choices that you've made about your academic preparation. These are wonderful additional components to add, and it's a wasted opportunity to put nothing in that section. I also think, most places ask for recommendations of some sort. Some places will make them optional. Our teacher recommendation at Willamette is technically optional, although the vast majority of students submit at least one or more teacher recommendations. I think it's really important to make the most of that opportunity too. I feel like an application seems incomplete without recommendations, even though technically you don't have to have them. So taking the time to submit not just, the minimal letter of recommendation, but really a well-chosen letter or two is making the most of an opportunity. And I feel like it's a pitfall when students don't do that simply because it's not absolutely required. So just a couple of examples of what I would say are sort of an incomplete application. Here are two examples of the way different students have filled out the activities section of the Common application. And you can see on the left, the student has taken time to really give us a full picture of not just that they played soccer, but they played in a premier division. They were in several tournaments. They won the state cup. They were a leader on their team, and in their piano involvement, they, participated in recitals and competitions and got honors. And they really took time to figure out how to put all of this into the activities section in a very thoughtful way. The person on the right, it just looks like they were going fast. Soccer, their involvement was playing. That just doesn't tell me anything. That feels like you missed the opportunity to give me more. Even just to say something like, I played soccer and loved it for my school team. It's thoughtful to prepare something the way the student on the left has done. It looks rushed and feels like a missed opportunity, or feels incomplete to me as the reader to see something like the student on the right. Another example would be, this is kind of a funny one, I think, but Willamette asks a institution-specific question on our institutional page where we say, what's the single influencer that most encouraged you to apply to Willamette? And you can see on the left, the student put free application. That's why they applied. Well, that's really honest, probably, but as the reader, that doesn't really inspire me to want to extend for this student. It really doesn't help me know anything more about them. Whereas the student on the right gave this lovely answer that speaks to the fact that she's done her research about us. She knows our motto. She cares about what we care about. She used full and complete grammatically correct sentences. She maximized this opportunity to really give us a complete answer. Whereas I feel like the other student gave something that, to me, as the reader, feels pretty incomplete and a little bit off-putting. So don't fall into that pitfall. Pitfall number 3 is students getting so caught up in worrying about what their essay topic is rather than actually writing their essay. The essay is a really unique part of the application. It is the place where the student's voice comes through in a way that's very different than every other portion of the application. Lots of other parts of the application are very list-like or very kind of data-oriented, whereas the essay is like you're talking to us. So it's really distinctive. It's my favorite part of reading an application. It's the most personal component. So this is your chance to stand out in a way that's different than everything else. It's your chance to move the reader, move us to tears, to laughter, to deep thought, whatever it might be. And it's a very good thing to move the reader. It helps you stand out as somebody who's thoughtful and interesting. It makes my day, again, when I'm reading application after application after application all in a day, to have those essays where I cry a little bit. That's a great experience. That just sets that person apart. So you really want to maximize the opportunity that is the essay. And what I find so often is that I get questions from families about, well, is it okay to write about this topic? Or I was thinking about this being my topic, and I wondered if that was going to be different enough. And I always tell people it's not about the topic, really. There are no topics that I see as particularly off limits. We read about everything. So it's not really about the topic that you choose. It's about how you tell your story around that topic. It's about really using whatever the topic might be to give us both an example of really good writing and help us know that you have the skills that we need you to have. And then it's about telling us more about you and giving us that insight into who you are through your own voice. So I like to give the example, when I do essay writing workshops, I read this essay it's just beautifully written. And the topic, though, is about the fact that this student moved. He and his family moved when he was heading into high school. So that is not a glamorous topic. It's certainly not a unique topic. It's a common experience to lots and lots of students at some point in their life that they've moved to a different town or a different house. But the way this particular student wrote about that experience of moving and what it meant to him for his maturity and his reputation, and it was just wonderful. So it's not about the topic, it's about how you tell your story and trying to find a way to do that that's really unique to you. And just maximizing that opportunity that is the essay. Pitfall number 4, I would say, is just misunderstanding basic requirements. You know, in the college application process, deadlines matter. That's just true. Deadlines matter. Having all of the required credentials matters. We can't read an application until we know that all of the basic components are there. So not having one little piece that to you may seem like, oh, I don't know if they really need that. Well, we really need that. If it's on the list of things that you need to submit, it matters. Communication in this process matters. So if you're receiving communication from us, we're asking for something, it's pretty important to pay attention to that. And being organized matters. So I just really think it's important to do your research about each college that you're applying to and make sure you understand the different requirements. It's a big pitfall that to fall into the thinking that, well, place A said I need to do this on this timeline, so that must be true for everybody else. Not true at all. Unfortunately, this process isn't very standardized from college to college. So you really have to understand the requirements and the necessities from each place. You need to make a list of all the different deadlines, and then you need to meet them. You need to be organized, and you need to meet those deadlines so that you're maximizing your opportunities. And you really need to reach out and ask questions when they arise. I think sometimes students are so hesitant to do so. They think it will make them look uninformed or silly or something, and that isn't the case at all. Our job is to answer questions. Our job in admission is to facilitate this process for you and help you through it. And so we love it when you ask questions. It demonstrates your interest to us in our institution, and we like that connection. So you should never hesitate. And I would say that's true for parents too, to some degree. Parents can't be helicoptering on behalf of their student. You know, most interactions should come from the student, but parents have legitimate parent-like questions in this process too. And it is a-okay for you to reach out and make sure those are clarified as well. And then the final one, pitfall number 5, is just a failure to communicate, which is sort of what I was just delving into. You know, this process is all about us getting to know you. We need to understand who you are through lots of different channels in order to know if you're the right fit for us, in order to know if we are going to be able to offer you admission. And we want to offer you opportunities for you to get to know us, because we're not interested in you making a bad decision. If we offer you admission, we want you to know us well enough to be informed and to make the right match if you choose to come to Willamette. So it's really about that getting to know you opportunity on both sides, and neither of those things happen if there isn't adequate communication going on. So, you know, if we send you a communication through your student portal that you start when you apply to us, it's pretty important to pay attention to that. You know, we might be offering you a scholarship opportunity. We might be offering you a chance to come on a fly-in program to see us in the spring where we pay for your airfare. If you're not paying attention to the communication that we're sending to you, you may miss opportunities. And again, you just may miss the opportunities too to continue to demonstrate to us your interest in being a part of our community. And I don't think you want to do that. So communication is key. So those are the main pitfalls that I see. Those cover a lot of things. And then just as a very brief wrap up, how do we do these things virtually? How do we navigate some of this in a virtual world? Well, when it comes to the application process itself and the things that we've just talked about, the good news is that the vast majority of this is already an online process. The vast majority of completing the common application or another institutional application form it's already something that you do online. So there's not huge loss in this time of COVID in terms of how you're going to navigate that. And in fact, I think some would say, depending on what school schedules are going to look like for different students across the country this fall, some would say COVID has even freed up more time for students to be able to be that much more organized about their application. They may have just additional time that they wouldn't have had if they were in school in a normal way to be able to be thoughtful and thorough. So maybe that's one, small silver lining in all of this. The challenge, I think, in this year for seniors who are actually navigating the application process is figuring out how to make the most of your year in terms of what you're putting in that application, where activities and involvement are concerned, because I know many students have lost activities and extracurricular pursuits that would have happened last spring or in this coming year that normally would have rounded out their application in a way that would help us understand them. So I think the challenge this year is to look for what are those ways that you're filling your time that you can list on your application as ways that you're serving or interacting or learning or being active in some way that can help us understand who you are. I'll also mention that at least for those 900 and some schools that use the common application like Willamette does, for this coming year, a specific adjustment has been made to the common app that they've added a question that specifically says, how has COVID-19 affected you? And is there anything you need to tell us about your life that as a result of the pandemic, so that you can use that opportunity to say, well, my grades were affected, or my family was affected in this way, or my activities look different, or whatever it might be. It gives students an outlet to make sure that their application readers will understand, again, their context, where they are coming from and what has affected them in this last year. And I think the Common App has done that so that students can kind of put all of that information in that part of the application. And then hopefully the rest of the application doesn't have to be all just totally COVID related. I would really caution people from writing their college essay about COVID-19, even though it is such a common experience for everybody this year, and it's a huge life event. So some would lean toward that as a reasonable topic. I think it's going to be so, we're going to be so saturated with essays about that, it will be hard to tell that story in a truly unique way. So I think by being able to put your COVID experience in this other question and free yourself up to write about something else would probably be a good thing to do. So I think the application itself can really be managed well in a world where we're mostly virtual and apart. The visit part of this year for seniors is harder, although I think there still is good news. There are a lot of places where you can't visit in person like you would probably like to, but there are some where you still can. And so you want to be doing your research to see if there are visits still available near you that might help inform your decision. Willamette is offering in-person visits to one family at a time. We're doing it in a really safe and responsible way, but trying to be responsive to those students who are so eager to still proceed with their college search. And we're not alone in that. So looking at places where you might be able to still get a visit opportunity is a good thing to do. And then, the really good news is, because of all of this, we have learned to do distance visit opportunities in a way that most college campuses never had before. We never knew how to give all of these presentations by Zoom. We didn't do virtual information sessions or student meet and greets. We just didn't do that. Most places didn't. The only thing that we used to do online really were Skype interviews now and then. And so now we have this incredibly expanded virtual visit opportunity that most places are offering. And it means you can visit far more places than you could before. Even though it's not in person, you can still delve into understanding far more places through these virtual visits than you might have been able to in the past. So I really encourage people to take advantage of that. And then truly do understand that admission staff like me are clamoring for ways to connect with families, because we're limited in doing that in person, because we can't go out and visit high schools all over the country like we normally would do this time of year. We are really, really looking for ways to do our jobs and connect with the students who are looking to connect with us. So all you have to do is reach out, but it's on you to do that. And so delving into where the virtual visits live on different websites is what you should do as a next step. It's very easy to stay connected with Willamette. My contact information is here, and our virtual visit website address is there. We have lots of things that we're doing virtually that we're really excited about. So just dipping your toe into some of those things is a really good next step. So that's a lot of words. That is what I had prepared, and I'm really happy to take questions if there are questions about some of the things that I shared, or delving into even different topics.
Yeah, we have about 6 questions, and I just want to acknowledge that we're a few minutes past 7. We're a little delayed, and then had a little bit of a tech issue. So for those who kind of need to get off soon, I'm going to try to do a little rapid fire here if we can. But the first one is, what are your thoughts on hiring a college planner?
I think there are some great college planners out there, or private college counselors out there. I think they can be very helpful. I think if you do that, you need to recognize that that person's role is not to complete the application for you. It's not to do all of the research that really should be on your plate. It's really, if you're doing that in terms of seeking really honest and fair feedback about places that you're a good fit for, and those strategies for connecting with those institutions. I bristle a little bit at the idea of, well, I need to hire someone to get me into some of these more selective places, or to provide me with tricks to get in. To me, that doesn't feel very genuine, and I don't like that idea. But someone who can help you narrow your list, somebody who's familiar with a lot of campuses and processes, who can help narrow that list and help you stay on track. I see nothing wrong. with that.
Great. Next question. Even if it's optional, is there a benefit to taking the SAT or ACT?
I think there is. I don't think it should ever be a process that hinders your focus on your actual academic coursework. I think classes and achieving in that day-to-day way is the most important thing for you to do. So if a student finds themselves moving toward this kind of anxiety and stress around test preparation that's taking away from their preparation just for, the paper that they need to write for their English class, I think that feels out of balance. But otherwise, I think it's not a bad idea. I think sometimes students will discover a school in the middle of their application process that they decide they want to apply to. And if they need a test score for that school, they will be disappointed in themselves that they don't have a test score in their back pocket. So I think it's probably not a bad idea.
All right, next one. If both AP and honors courses are available for the same class, is there a benefit to one over the other, especially if they both give dual credit?
I think in most contexts, AP is regarded as more rigorous than an honors level course. So if you're making a choice where you want to communicate that idea of seeking rigor and testing yourself where rigorous curriculum is concerned, then you should choose AP over honors.
Great. The next one is just about who reviews applications. Is that done on an individual reviewer basis, or is there a committee? What that looks like?
That varies a lot from school to school. So I can't speak to every place, but I think in most situations, it's an individual. Most places are organized around kind of territory management, where the admission person works with a certain set of schools or a certain state, a certain part of the country, where they really can get to know those schools and understand the preparation and the counselors and the people from that region, so that we really know what we're comparing to. And so usually it's that territory manager that will read the application first and foremost. Then sometimes there might be a second or a third reader who takes the, recommendation of that first reader and either confirms or challenges that. And then in some cases, there's a full committee that will look at least some portion of the application pool. So at Willamette, it's really those applications where there's just kind of a standout concern, where there's somebody who's on a margin in some way for us, but we really want to advocate for them. Or there's just something where we feel like, gosh, I need some other brains on this one to help me figure out if the fit is right. Those kinds of applications will go to our full committee, and we'll have a conversation about that.
Okay. And we have one that came in. How firm are you, I'm assuming Willamette, on language requirements due to the difficulty of learning a second language online?
So Willamette recommends, we love foreign language because our faculty has told us for years and years that, foreign language helps develop the brain in a way that is very different than every other kind of academic pursuit. So we do encourage students to take foreign language as part of their college prep. But we know there are exceptions to that. We know in some cases students don't have a lot of opportunity to take very much foreign language in their high school. Or we know sometimes there can be scheduling conflicts where something has to go after, the minimum 2-year requirement. And so sometimes that's language. Or sometimes we know there's a learning difference that makes foreign language a very different thing for a particular student. So we do look at that in the application. We look for it, but it is not necessarily a deal breaker in terms of being admissible. And certainly where COVID is concerned, we will understand if students make a choice to not try to learn something that would be difficult for them to learn. Again, this is where that additional information section on the common application needs to be used, where a student just explains that choice or that decision, so that we have context for it.
And then another one we got is, how does a college essay differ from, say, a scholarship application essay?
So not really a lot. I think the purpose of any kind of essay, for an application essay, whether it's for admission or for a scholarship, the purpose is really generally the same: to tell us about who you are, to answer a specific question that might be asked as the prompt, and then to demonstrate your writing ability. So really there's not a tremendous difference. I think they are the same. I think in either case also, you are looking to stand out among whoever your rivals are for that award or that admission opportunity. And so looking for ways to be unique and outstanding among the group, that's consistent about both types of essays also.
And then the final question, I think this is a big one because there's so many layers here. What is the difference, if there are any, of being critiqued by different types of schools, whether that's an Ivy League school, a public or a private four-year university, or a community college? Is there any big standouts or differences in those?
Yeah, I think there's some things that are consistent and some that are different. I think, a number of schools, regardless of selectivity, choose a holistic application review. So a number of particularly private institutions use what we call holistic review, which means we're looking at not just, a test score and a GPA and then seeing where you fall on a grid. We are looking at your activities. We're interested in your writing. We're trying to look for trends within your transcript. We're understanding what your school is and where you come from. We're looking very holistically at all of those pieces and factoring all of them in. So again, a lot of private institutions use holistic review. Some public institutions do as well, but it's more common for public institutions, and especially large public institutions, to use more of that grid determination of really where things fall to test score and GPA, and that's really what places you in the admit or deny category. When it comes to selectivity, I would say, I mean, I don't work at Stanford or Harvard, so I've never been in on their admission committee. I have certainly over the years seen lots of dual applicants where, you know, we've had somebody apply to us and to Stanford, and there are times when a student who might be on the margin for us is admitted to Stanford, and they make sense there for them, even though Stanford is considerably more selective in the aggregate than we are. So I think what that means is when it comes down to committees making their ultimate decisions is there are times when it just has to do with filling institutional needs for an interesting and diverse and varied group of students. So, you know, at Willamette, we're always looking for that as individual readers and as part of the admission committee. We're thinking about who is the group of learners going to be, who is ultimately going to move through this experience together at Willamette, and are we making sure that we're giving this group the opportunity to interact with people from lots of different backgrounds and places and, you know, thought processes and all of that. And so I think more selective places do that as well. They're looking to build that interesting group, and so there's no kind of cookie cutter response for what that might look like from place to place. It really varies with the institution.
Well, and I think that gets back to, you know, they recognize that these are people with hopes and dreams and, you know, a journey that has brought them to apply to this school. So they're really intentional about how they're making those decisions. Do you have anything else before we kind of roll off here that you want to add or summarize?
Yeah, I love those questions. Those are really great questions. Again, I just appreciate that people have sat in and listened, and I hope that the information is helpful. And as I've said at the end of each one of these in the series, I really hope that people will genuinely understand that if you have other questions or needs within this process, even if Willamette is not on the radar screen at all as a place that you might be applying to, if I can just be helpful, if I can answer questions generally, I'm really happy to do so. All of our staff is, but my contact information is available. I'm easy to find on our website, and I really would love to be of help if I can.
That's wonderful. And as always, I mean, this is our third time, but thank you so much for going through all of the different facets and intricacies of this process. It is one of the biggest decisions someone will make in their life, deciding, you know, where they want to pursue their higher education, and you make it so approachable and accessible. So again, we just appreciate your insight and your time. So thank you so much for that.
Very happy to help. Thanks for the opportunity, Tiffany.
Of course. And thank you all for joining us. We're going to sign off now. I've included Sue's contact information in the chat box. Please know this will be posted on WooStream shortly, our website. And if you have any other questions, please reach out to us. We want to be a resource and provide that support to the best of our ability. We hope you all stay happy and healthy, even though things are so different now. And we'll just sign off there and hope you all take care. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.